You may be asking yourself, what does childhood trauma do to the brain? Have you ever wondered what that trauma over the development of your childhood has done to you? Have you ever questioned if that trauma will ever go away? Have you wondered what the brain goes through and the heart and the mind? Well, in today's video, I'm going to highlight some things that childhood trauma interferes with. I'm going to come from an existential perspective, which is my theoretical orientation, if you will, which is basically the career philosophy or the healthcare philosophy that I use in most of my psychotherapy. From that existential perspective, we're going to get a few examples of what happens to the brain in childhood trauma. The brain is very resilient for children, and even infants who have experienced childhood trauma can actually recover from that and live life very comfortably. You wouldn't even know that they experienced childhood trauma. That's how resilient their brain is. But in some children and adolescents and even adults, resilience is far, far away from them. So in today's video, I'm going to highlight what it actually does to your mind. But before we jump in, let me briefly introduce myself in case you are new. My name is Tamra, and I'm an internationally and board certified trauma therapist. I'm also licensed in mental health, and I specialize in treating children, teens, and families, as well as adults who are dealing with trauma. Let's jump in. So there's a couple of videos on this channel that I think really highlights what my theoretical orientation or professional philosophy is. I'm an existential psychotherapist, and I also work with cognitive behavior therapy, which is really looking at the relationship between thoughts and behavior and emotions. But for the purposes of this video, I'm going to lean on my existential and my spiritual perspective to try to help you understand from a different angle what actually happens to you when you are traumatized as a child. Now, there may be two existential professionals that you have heard of. There's many that I highly respect, but these two right here on the screen, Irvin Yalom and Viktor Frankl, are two individuals who, grabbed a hold of existential philosophy and really expanded it to help us understand what actually happens to us. There are, quite a few things that existential psychotherapy can tell us about who we are at the core of who we are. The main question for existential psychotherapy or philosophy is, what is death consisting of? What is it? How do we process it? And where do we go after we die? Another philosophy within existentialism is meaninglessness, right? So how do I live a life with meaning and purpose without feeling like I'm wasting my time? Isolation and freedom are also two other concepts from existentialism that is important to be aware of. All of those things right here that I just labeled really is the foundation of existentialism. That's why I did this video right here and this video right here, which is from an existential perspective, to help you understand what actually goes on in your heart and what actually goes on in your mind when you are trying to process dysfunctional and unhealthy family. So, I think when we talk about childhood trauma, it's important to understand that you're not just going through a situation that you can recover from. You're not just going through a situation that if you find the right tools and if you find the right therapist, you're going to recover and never look back. I strongly believe, and this is my professional understanding and experience, that childhood trauma is always present with us. You never recover from it. You learn how to deal with it, build from there, and continue on. So you learn how to live with it. And even with my own traumatic experiences in the past, I can safely say that there are times when I can feel that pain still in my heart. I can feel that pain still in my mind, and the memories and the emotions attached to that trauma. It isn't gone from me. It is still there. The only difference is I'm older. I have some professional foundation that I can rely on, and I have people that love me very much in my life, which makes it easier. But I'm never ever going to get rid of the trauma or the traumatic situation that has occurred in my life in the past. So The same thing for you. You never get over it. You just learn to live with it and move on. And sometimes you can learn to heal from it as well. And that's known as post-traumatic growth. I'm going to post a video in the description box for you below so that you can get a little bit more information on what that means. So let's focus on what happens to the mind in childhood trauma. Well, first, let's look at the fact that childhood trauma dulls the capacity for self-awareness. It's really hard for you to be self-aware when you are experiencing childhood trauma. The only thing that your body and your mind wants you to do is survive. And when you survive, right, you've accomplished something emotionally and psychologically. So the body and the brain, they're very much connected. I talk about that all the time on this channel. There's a mind and body connection. Here's a video right up here if you want to go back and check that out as well. But that connection between the mind and the body, or the brain and the body, right? Those connections, no matter what we go through, it's going to always be there. So when you're experiencing a traumatic situation, right, it dulls the body and the mind's ability to be self-aware. It's almost like, the traumatic situation has kind of snatched you out of reality, and now you're in this zone that's nebulous and confusing, almost like a warp zone or some kind of tornado, and you can't get out long enough to understand what's going on around you. So it's almost like a dissociative state. I guess I could say that. And so childhood trauma dulls our ability and our capacity for self-awareness. The next thing that it does is it reduces freedom and, deters responsibility. When we are experiencing a traumatic situation as a child and we're trying to develop and understand the world around us, it's really hard to feel free when you really don't have the support and the secure base that you need to be free. And it deters, childhood trauma deters responsibility. You run away from responsibility, perhaps because it's frightening. You don't know how to embrace personal responsibility because you are emotionally and psychologically battled, for lack of a better word, right? You're constantly in this fight trying to defend yourself. And so, trauma deters your ability to be responsible sometimes. And then it also reduces the feelings of freedom in your life. You become a prisoner. The next thing is that it disrupts the establishment of meaningful relationships. Fear of abandonment is something that is really real. And if you have borderline personality disorder, it's truly real, right? Because at the core of that disorder is a fear of abandonment, stormy relationships, and hot and cold emotions sometimes. If you don't have borderline personality disorder, then childhood trauma in and of itself steals from you the ability to trust other people and to feel safe with them. So you run away from relationships, or you run away from falling in love, or you run away from having a really good friend by your side, or you run away from a family member who's reaching for you to help you because you don't know how to engage in healthy relationships. Trauma disrupts the establishment of healthy and equal, I'm going to say, and even balanced relationships. It disrupts meaningful relationships. That's just what it does. Childhood trauma confuses and slows down identity development. You cannot understand who you are if your trauma is constantly in your face, if you're constantly feeling pain, if your soul is constantly feeling attacked and battled, by things all around you, if you're constantly blocking and trying to protect yourself and put up defense mechanisms and push forward, you can't develop a healthy identity because, you're not engaging in life. You're not living life. You're actually pushing through life with brute force, and that never works. The only way that you can develop a healthy identity is to heal from trauma. That's really the only way, because other than that, you're living your life based off of your past, based off the trauma, based off of, how you think and feel about the situation, which may be skewed in some ways, right? When you have had childhood trauma, cognitive distortions or thinking errors are likely to occur. And those are basically skewed ways that we see a situation based on emotions and an incorrect perception of things, Cognitive distortions and thinking errors get in the way if you have childhood trauma, and that then ultimately gets in the way of proper identity development. You may also notice that trauma throws the body into its natural defense mechanisms and its natural survival mechanisms. Your body goes into fight or flight mode. You begin to feel increased heart rate, racing thoughts, you're sweating, your stomach may be kind of flipping and turning around. You may be wringing your hands out of anxiety and nervousness. You might be biting your nails. Maybe you're shaking your leg. Maybe you're pulling your hair out and your eyelashes out, right? Those are all signs that you are in central nervous system dominance. I talk about that right up here in this video if you want to go watch that as well. And that's basically the body's defense mechanism, It's the fight or flight mode. You either stay and get beat up by the thing that you're defensive about, or you run away. And a lot of people struggle with deciding which one to do when they have experienced childhood trauma. So sometimes the body shuts completely down. And I'm going to do a video about that pretty soon here. So stick around on the channel. That is coming up next video. Now, another thing that we need to be aware of is that childhood trauma decreases your interest in meaningfulness, upholding values and morals, and really finding purpose in your life. Why would you even want to engage in trying to find meaning and strength and values and purpose and really holding firm to those when all your body knows to do is to fight against everything that it's defensive about, right? When you're in defense mode, when you're in central nervous system dominance, when your mind is constantly racing with things that frighten you, it's hard for you to settle down long enough to understand what your purpose is, to understand what your values are, to understand what your morals are and your ethics, And so because of that, right, you miss out on that opportunity. And a lot of times the loss of that opportunity of finding out what you stand for, what you believe in, what's meaningful in your life, what's valuable, you miss out on that. So because of that, you might become rather immature and you may not be progressing and growing with other people in your cohort or your age group or your generation, because trauma very much can reduce your ability to grow and mature, right? Sometimes it causes you to regress into the developmental stage you were in when the trauma occurred. So let's say, for example, your trauma occurred when you were 19. If it had such a major impact on you that it shifted your world and your life, you may begin to behave immaturely. So you may be 53, but your thinking capacity is at a 19-year-old's level. And that's because trauma disrupts your ability to really focus on meaning, purpose in life, and what you stand for. It's a really difficult life to live when you have all of these things bombarding you. That's why it's important to, work on yourself and develop a wellness plan and possibly see a psychotherapist who is experienced in trauma therapy. Have support groups around you, people who understand your journey, right? Get really good sleep and adjust your sleep regimen. Engage in learning about natural remedies. Start taking vitamins, right? Journal, engage in meditation, check out apps that can help you rest at night, These are all coping skills, and these are all the important pieces of a wellness plan to help you get from point A to point B. I want you to think of childhood trauma as a physiological response to what has happened to you. Childhood trauma really is a physiological response to what has happened to you. And the best way to deal with physiological consequences is to find the things that your body needs to help you recover. It's not just up here. It's not just in here. It happens to your entire body. The connection, remember this right here, that connection. So in order to deal with that connection, you need to be aware of how to help yourself physiologically. Thank you so much for being with me today in this video. Please go ahead and give this video a thumbs up if it was helpful, and go ahead and hit that subscribe button and comment below. Don't forget to hit that bell button so you'll know every single time I post a video. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.